In recent days, I've seen many articles mentioning Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Released in 1967, it's often regarded by many as one of the most influential albums in music history, and rightly so. This eighth Beatles album marked a revolution in the music industry, not only for its musical content, but also for the way it was conceived, produced, and presented to the public. The album stands as a milestone in sonic experimentation, produced by George Martin, often called the Fifth Beatle. It's a classic example of how studio technology can serve as an extension of artistic creativity. The tracks were built using layers of unusual instruments, including brass and string orchestrations, sound effects, and the pioneering use of techniques like reverse tape recordings and early synthesizers. This experimental approach was rare at the time and helped set new standards for pop music. Sgt. Pepper's is often considered the first concept album in pop music. Although it doesn't follow a linear narrative, the record is unified by the idea that the Beatles become another band, the fictional Lonely Hearts Club Band. This idea gave them the freedom to explore different genres and styles, trying, but not quite succeeding, to maintain a thematic cohesion throughout the tracks. As for the influence this album had on music history, I can point to several examples, starting with a Little Help from My Friends, which was famously re-recorded by Joe Cocker with Jimmy Page on guitar, taking it to Woodstock and making it immortal. Lucy in the Sky, who doesn't remember Elton John's version? Getting better? I'd argue Queen built their entire career on the foundation of this song. Go check for yourself. Within You Without You sounds like Led Zeppelin 3 or Physical Graffiti. She's Leaving Home? King Crimson surely drank from this well. Frank Zappa even parodied the album cover in his We're Only in It for the Money. Despite its legendary status, Sgt. Pepper's to me is not above criticism. I actually think it's overrated and hasn't aged all that well, I'll admit. I don't like the album. I know that might sound almost heretical to Beatles fans and music lovers in general. After all, it's frequently hailed as one of the greatest masterpieces in pop music, a landmark of sonic and cultural innovation. But as much as I admire its historical importance and the impact it had, I just can't connect with it the way others do. When I first started getting into music, Sgt. Pepper's was already 10 years old, and my mind was completely blown by Black Sabbath's debut album, Led Zeppelin II, and Made in Japan by Deep Purple. There was no way I could go back and truly enjoy what I now see as the naivety of the Beatles' sound. Let's break it down. First, there's the issue of experimentation. Sgt. Pepper's is celebrated for its innovative production and the use of studio techniques that defied the conventions of its time. But to me, that innovation often feels more like a technical exercise than an emotional musical experience. The layers of sound, effects, and grand orchestrations, which many see as artistic advancement, come off as cold and distant. It lacks something visceral, like the experimentation of King Crimson. It lacks something that makes me feel, rather than simply admire. Second, the concept album idea introduced by Sgt. Pepper's, with a fictional band taking the stage, is interesting in theory, but in practice feels disjointed. The songs don't follow a clear narrative, and the promised cohesion of the concept dissolves when the tracks are listened to individually. And finally, There's the problem of accessibility. While the Beatles' earlier albums were straightforward, with catchy, albeit naive melodies and lyrics that spoke directly to the heart, albeit also naive, Sgt. Pepper's seems more concerned with impressing than with communicating. Songs like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and A Day in the Life are undeniably complex and rich in detail, but that complexity, for me, often becomes a barrier instead of a gateway into the Beatles' world. At its core, my issue with Sgt. Pepper's is that it seems to have lost the simplicity and emotion that made the Beatles a great band in the first place. The album is grand, yes, but that grandeur comes at the expense of something more intimate and authentic. I understand its place in music history and recognize its role in the evolution of rock, but in the end, it's not an album that brings me joy or one that I revisit often. In a world where Sgt. Pepper's is almost universally acclaimed, I know my opinion is in the minority. Still, I believe it's valid to acknowledge that not every great album resonates the same way with everyone. And for me, Sgt. Pepper's simply isn't one of the records I love.